Hi everyone. This is Anaya Science Witch, or my actual real name is Anna. And I'm with my new friend here, Joni Spring, and we're going to do a little podcast on the topic of Ogham, which is the Irish standing stones that have a particular type of written glyph language on them. And how Joni and I met is that I made a video and put it on my YouTube a few weeks back about how I see Ogham from a human health perspective, because when I saw the Ogham written script, my brain said, oh, that looks to me like DNA and amino acids and all of this kind of stuff. And I made a little presentation about that. And then Joni got in contact with me because she's got all this amazing knowledge from a slightly different perspective. My perspective is Chinese medicine and health in the human body. And Joni's perspective is more on the mythology. She's in Ireland. She's an Irish person in Ireland. And she's studying a whole bunch of amazing things to do with linguistics and mythology and Druidism. And so we've connected together to see what we can start putting into this Ogham puzzle, because it is kind of one of those mysterious topics that no one really knows much about Ogham. And there's one aspect of it that does seem to be that it is a written language, but there's a lot more to it when we inspect it as a potential language of archetypes, and archetypes that form patterns that can be read in different layers. So that's me. This is us. And so Joni, tell us about what you're doing with your studies and what you want to investigate about Ogham from your world.
Hello everybody, my name is Joni Spring. I'm a general student of all things historical, particularly anything pre-1750 all the way back. I think my fascination with Ogham or Ogham or Ogham, however you want to pronounce the Irish pre-alphabetic language or pre-Latin influence language that you generally see on standing stones, most of which are in and around the Cork and Kerry area. I'm originally from Kerry in the southwest of Ireland, but there's standing stones all along the western part of England and up towards Scotland. You have some which just have Ogham, Irish inscriptions. You have some with Ogham and Latin, some with Ogham and Pictish, some with Ogham and Norse, a runic type language. So there's some of it even has Ogham and Welsh. So you can see there's an interconnectedness with all the different cultures in that area. My fascination started, I suppose, from a young age, 8 and 9 years old, being taken to some of these. And when I was 13, I read The White Goddess by Robert Graves, and he goes into the mythical backdrop of many different folk cultures throughout Europe. And he did his research in the 20s, 30s and 40s. And some of it did get looked down on by certain sects of society. Some of it got picked up on. So people in the pagan world would have used some of his ideas to influence how they look at Ogham. And we'd be looking at some of his ideas as we go through our conversation. But more recently in my studies, I've taken a class in Irish paleography, which is the history of Irish writing. And some of our classes were on Ogham or Ogham. And then I've done Old and Medieval Irish as well through those classes. And I'm hoping from an academic level to attend a postgraduate diploma in Old Irish in the coming autumn semester, or I think they called the Michaelmas semester in Trinity, hopefully.
That's amazing.
So that's where I'm coming from. But the reason what attracted me to Anaya's work is she did an interview recently on the internet, and one of my friends saw the interview and basically said, Joni, this lady has some of your ideas, but she's like put maps and pictures and stuff. And I'm like, oh wow, someone's done some of the hard work. Excellent. And maybe I'll be able to fill in any gaps she has. So I'm really excited by this connection, and I do hope this progresses. And for everybody who's watching us out there, please send in any recommendations or any links, or even if you want to join us later on as we develop this podcast. From my point of view, and you can back me up or add to it, we're not just looking at lines carved into a stone, we're looking into a whole culture, and we're looking into it at a poetic point of view. From the point of view is there's very little actual facts out there because stuff has gotten burnt and buried over the years, but we're tapping into the spiritual aspect, we're tapping into the ethers, and we're trying to figure out what the deeper meanings behind these etchings on rocks are. And as an Irish woman who's very proud of my country's history and culture, I don't think Druidic culture or pre-Christian Irish culture was just like a whole pile of people trying to kill each other or casting spells. I think they had a much deeper foundational knowledge for their whole culture and their experience of the world. And I think through our interaction, we'll be able to find out that Ireland is a repository of language, but also that Ireland wasn't just a little island stuck out in the middle of the ocean at the west of Europe. I think Ireland had some connection, had very strong connections with a lot of other cultures. And I think we might be able to discover this. So hello, everybody. It's lovely to meet you all.
Yeah, well, that's what I've discovered in the work I've been doing, because I've noticed that Chinese medicine and Taoism has all of this link to Ireland as well. So did Chinese medicine or Taoism means the middle way, did that come from Ireland? And it's like in the Conor McDarry works, he's saying that the Phoenician race that came from Ireland were the ones that seeded their knowledge out to all cultures of the world. And that's why all those cultures have the same repeating patterns of the sort of spiritual religious stories, that all in the echo chamber, they're all saying the same thing. They're just different names for different characters and different cultures and different regions, but it's all the same archetypal characters, right?
Exactly. And that comes from a deep knowledge of the archetypes, that archetypes only change with culture, but the intrinsic nature of the archetypes doesn't really change throughout time. And that's why when we look at mythological stories, they resonate on a very deep level, because the archetypes are very, very true in their essence, at their core. Excuse me. I am now charging, so everything.
Oh, that was the beep, the charging beep.
Yes, the charging beep, the relief of the charging beep. So I think at this point, we'll discuss. So from a paleographic, paleo means old, graphic means to write. So from the paleographic point of view, within the Irish context, Ogham or Ogham, depending on where you come from, is the first writing we have evidence of in Ireland. It usually is written as carved lines. They can be perfectly horizontal, or they can slant to the left or to the right. and they're usually done along the edge, or in the absence of an edge, a straight line is carved against which the smaller lines are either perpendicular or diagonally carved against it.
So it's like when you're talking edge, you're talking about the corner
of the
stone,
or
yeah, the vertice.
Yeah, vertical. So what you call it? If there's no edge, a vertical line is carved, and then the lines are carved through it or against it. Now, some are only carved to the left, some are only carved to the right, and some are carved all the way through, depending on the letters.
Yeah. And do you read it top to bottom or bottom to top?
It's bottom to top and around the corner. It can go around the corner as well.
Okay, so you're reading it starting at the bottom, going up.
Exactly.
Well, I suspected, because they're plugged into the earth, and it's the earth vibration that it's expressing.
Exactly. And most of the existing stone pillars that are roughly hewn in general, they're not highly polished or anything, but most of the stone pillars, or most of the pillars that they're written on, are stones, or made of stone. So then they're called Ogham stones because there are stones with Ogham carved into them. So that's, a very, it's very practical and just a way of describing them. They're generally considered to be boundary markers between one family's land and another. And there's a lot of the inscriptions are Conor, son of Crahur, Crahur is an older version of the word Conor. So Conor, son of Dira, son of so and so, and they might have a dedication or a prayer, or they might say fell in battle here, or something like that.
Okay.
Some of the more complicated ones have whole prayers in them, but a lot of them are in quite remote areas, and that's why they get presented generally as boundary markers between one family's land and another family's land. And then, because after the fall of the Roman Empire, Ireland basically remained and developed into a more Christian country, and actually produced a lot of manuscripts that went back out through Europe, as their culture relatively had about 400 years of peace until the Vikings came and caused a little bit of a couple of skirmish in the bigger, more wealthier monasteries. But because of this, Irish culture got transported across to Western England, namely Cornwall and parts of Wales. So then you brought the Ogham tradition across the water, and you do have Ogham stones there with with combined Welsh inscriptions. Some of them, I think there's one or two in Cornish. And then as you go farther up the coast, as we know, Iona was a very famous ecclesiastical centre, and we have some Pictish inscriptions with on Ogham stones as well. But Scotland was originally a colony of the Dalriada kingdom, which is in what we would call Northern Ireland right now, and it's called Scotland because in medieval times Scotty actually meant Irish person. So there's all this interconnectedness of the cultures, and while Scottish is a distinct language, it would have been a derivative of the Irish spoken in the Northern Irish counties at the time. So, and it took off and did its own thing, but it's still very distinct from Brittonic, or what is actually spoken in Wales, Wales is a different family of Celtic languages to Irish and Scottish and to Cornish as well, apparently. So so you have this idea of the Celtic world, wherein the Ogham stones become the start of the language, and then as Christianity takes over and the Irish language, the monks or the Irish church was very distinct from the mainland European church. So what they did was the families who went into the ecclesiastical settings took it upon themselves to take the Ogham and transpose it into a Latin language, so it preserved the language, and therefore you end up where the Irish language is put in using Latin alphabet with the fathers added for accents. But you also have this thing where in modern Irish, because we put in H's for what we call the shevus, or SH is a sh sound, DH is a duh or a sound, and so on, to make it more align with Latin. They represented the H sound with a dot over it, but in very early times they just took out the H to make it look more Latin and didn't put the representative dot over it. So to a modern Irish speaker reading old or medieval Irish, it looks really completely alien to what the Irish they learn today. And they often didn't put the H sound at the end of any words, because in Latin you don't have H's at the end of words. So
Wow.
People were like, does that sound like a H? And yeah, it should, but they just don't put it in because they want to make it look more Latin. Okay, that makes no sense. I know, but that's what they did. Okay. But even with that kind of change, what you see is legends being written that are clearly from a completely different culture, but they're being preserved in the newer version of the culture. So you could take one legend, I can't think of the name, maybe Diarmaid Agus Gráinne, or one of those kind of romance ones. So in the earlier versions of the story, the two lovers run off and they have a wild, passionate night in the forest. And in a subsequent version, after a few passionate nights in the forest, a priest comes and gives them a blessing. So now they're kind of married in kind. And then in a much later version of the legend, a whole bishop comes out and performs a whole marriage ceremony, and then they have their passionate night in the forest.
Oh, because yeah.
Yeah.
You can't do it the other way around.
So you can see the progression of the culture as Christianity and Christian morals and ethics takes over from pre-Christianity, where people often had extramarital sex and there was no hassle with it, because once you got married, that was a separate set of boundaries that was put up. But what you did before marriage wasn't considered immoral or whatever, because the idea of having, like in that case, sex before marriage wasn't a big deal. You know, it's just as the culture progresses, how things is viewed changes. And also, you're talking about the fact that not everybody was able to read. So the person writing the manuscript was writing to a direct audience of probably 10 to 20% of the entire population, but other people were being read to from the manuscript.
Right.
So you have all this thing, and in Christian Ireland, the idea of the Ogham stones, or probably inscripted stones, becomes the high cross idea, where you have all these panels on a cross with all these biblical scenes written on them, and it was a pictorial way of showing people scenes out of the Bible at a time when, before Caxton, before printing, having a Bible in your home was completely prohibitive for most people.
I've heard that, and I think McDarry said that in his work, that Irish people were forbidden from reading the Bible.
Yeah, I have a lot of his ideas I totally resonate with. The thing is, he's not always coming from a solid historical understanding. So where I would see that is from a point of view of being a Catholic, your priest had to interpret the Bible because the priest knew Latin, and unless you were in higher nobility, you didn't learn Latin. So that was the function of the priest, was to interpret the religion for you.
But what if the book was written in Irish, not Latin?
The first Irish Bible that we know of wasn't produced until the 1600s.
Right.
So like that was the whole point. One of the huge points of the Reformation was to produce everything in the native language of the countries. But because the power of the church was the locus of the power of the church was the fact that they put everything in Latin and nobody really spoke Latin.
Right.
Which is interesting because
so just to keep that knowledge to the select few.
Exactly. And as we know, the New Testament was originally produced in Greek, because Greek was the lingua franca of the educated classes until Jesus's time and a little bit afterwards. And in fact, Isaac Newton was the first person to produce scientific works in English, because you had to, it was called natural philosophy and not science back in those days. But he was the one who said, okay, not everybody reads ancient Greek, we need to produce it in English so that everybody can disseminate this. Saying, strictly speaking, that Irish people were not allowed to read the Bible takes out the essential understanding that everybody who was Catholic only had access to the Latin Bible, and the only person with Latin in the parish, besides the doctors, if you're lucky enough to have a formally trained doctor in your area, was the priest. So that's the lack of allowance, so that when King James produces the Bible in English, it's a complete game changer. You've frozen. Can you see me?
You've frozen too. You've gone red. Red bars. I'm still connected.
I can hear you and see you now.
Oh, now we're back.
Brilliant. What was the last thing I said that you heard?
So you were talking about the fact that McDarry sort of failed to acknowledge that the people in the church wouldn't be able to read Latin, therefore the priest was the interpreter.
Exactly. So it wasn't purely a colonial thing, it was a religious thing. So which I know factors into colonialism, but the thing is, it's like that's what the big point of the Reformation was producing the religious texts in the languages, so that in the various languages, so that everybody could access them. The Old and the New Testament were produced in Irish for the first time in the 17th century, in the 1600s, just around the time the King James Bible was starting to make its way in popularity. And we do know that even though there was a suppression of Catholicism in Ireland in and around the time of King James, we do know that people in Ireland were highly educated, and there are references to people buying and selling cattle in Greek and Latin in very remote towns in Ireland.
Wow.
Even though they were not allowed to access formal education in the colonial system, they were getting education locally in underground education ways that were they were known as hedge schools, so that people, and we do have Irish texts with Greek and Latin translations on alternate pages. People were being taught medicine through Irish, they were being taught science through Irish, and a number of other things. And they even found something recently where they had an Irish textbook that had an Arabic text sequestered away in it. So there was ways of disseminating the information, but because it was a colony being suppressed by a colonial power, lots of people couldn't get access to the main education framework. They had to work around it.
You're frozen again. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
When the bars go red on your name, does that mean it's my connection or your connection that's struggling?
It's your connection. I can see I'm yellow at the moment next to
Yeah.
you. So I'm just, so it's kind of a medium.
Yeah, it just keeps dancing around. I wonder also if it's because of the subject matter. I notice like what we were talking about before about getting excited and having like a telekinetic effect. Also maybe the words like Jesus and Bibles and all of that.
All of these things can factor into it because they're all sensitive topics and they're all highly emotionally charged. So you could be on something there. Yes. So what you have on a broad outline, so from about the 6th century to about the year 1000, you have Irish monks bringing Christianity back into Europe, and according to some sources, Irish monks not only set up places like Iona and Lindisfarne in Scotland and England, but they also set up places like the Sorbonne and many of the large universities across Europe. And they were well sought after because they spoke fluent Greek and Latin. So they were used as the diplomats across the courts in Europe. So there's always an Irish person stuck in it somewhere, like.
So with the what was I going to ask about the yeah, when you were talking about the stones being boundary markers and often being inscribed with like the family or the lineage of the fathers and the sons and whose land it was, I guess. Is there are there other stones that are not that kind of writing? Like you've said that there's like there was some poetry or something.
Yeah, they have some prayers and things like that. You see, whether or not they were originally boundary markers or whether there's a collection of stones in Kerry that are they're put in an easily accessible area and they've got various inscriptions on them. And I'll get a photograph and I'll send it to you later on to put in this. And some of them have, they just have names on them and things like that. But who's
frozen again?
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
You're
We're back.
Yeah, you're back. I think so. Some of the stones
Sounding like a robot again.
Some of them have just very basic inscriptions and they have people's names in them.
Yeah.
And some of them have little symbols carved and things like that. So the reason why they're considered boundary markers in a lot of cases is some of the ones that still stand in their original area are they're really remote and they're the only thing in the landscape that's really obvious. So people assume that's their only purpose. We don't, as you know, in Ireland, we have what are called standing stones, which have no inscriptions on them, and they're usually arranged in a circle or in some kind of other formation. So a lot of people who are academic who've examined standing stones, they consider standing stones and Ogham stones separate entities.
Right. So Ogham stones are singular standing stones that have these specific inscriptions, and
Yes.
standing stones are often arranged in a formation, often a circle.
Yeah, and they often have no inscriptions on them, but they might be aligned to the sun or to the moon or to a certain set constellation and so on. However, who's to say an Ogham stone isn't a repurposed standing stone? But no one's looked into that I know of.
So it could have been there standing all along, and then one day someone decided to put writing on it.
Yeah, because you see, if you are commemorating a battle, what do? You have a battle on a big, wide, flat patch of land. A standing stone is often on a big, wide, flat patch of land.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it's the type of land that has nothing else on it but the one standing stone, sure, aren't you going to write an inscription on it? Because it saves you lugging another massive rock off the mountain and putting it there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's practical.
Now, so someone could totally see what we're saying and go, how dare you? But it's an idea. We put the ideas out there. This is the function of our conversations, and will be. It's to explore ideas. Some of which will be right, some of which will be wrong, some of which will need more exploration to prove or explore, or we'll say sift through to see where the information takes us.
And also, many ideas can be right at the same time, because if we're inspecting the language on one aspect, it has these alphabetical, this glyph means that letter, but also there's other layers to it, and one of those is trees, right? So each one of those 20 main glyphs corresponds to a specific tree. So,
a tree.
What's that all about?
Exactly, because as you know, in modern English, the 26 letters are separated into 21 consonants and 5 vowels. So
Yeah.
A, E, I, O, and U are the vowels, and everything else is a consonant. In the Ogham language, it's 4 groups of 5? I have to look it up here. Excuse me.
Four acme, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, and each one there's 5 sets. So that would be a 20 in total.
Yeah, so it's a four acme of 5 different letters, and you have plants, trees or shrubs associated with them, of which you have, and I just want to get with the English translation, because unfortunately my grasp of Irish shrubbery is not perfect. But they have there must be some correlation between why they group the trees and the shrubs in that particular way. So of course, I had everything loaded up and everything's decided to actually
Is it having a glitch like my computer before we started?
yes. So okay, so N, S, F, L, and B are here we go. So we have right side downward strokes is Beth, Lewis, Farn, Salia, and Nguyen. And then the left side is H for Oath, Dir, Tina, Call, and Kurt. Then you have the perpendicular strokes or horizontal strokes are Muin, Gort, Gaetal, Straff, and Ruis. And then you have the notches, which are the vowels, Alm, On, Ur, Edad, Idad.
What do you mean by notches? What are notches?
They've so you have what you call it? I'm just looking here. They're the one. So you have on the right side perpendicular, on the left side perpendicular, diagonal all the way through, and then you have horizontal all the way through. Are the what they call the notches for the vowels?
Okay, so these ones are the vowels, and all those ones and those ones and those ones are consonants.
Yes, exactly. And then there's composite ones because different words are factored in. So there's P, the vowel cluster, AE, there's IA, there's UI, there's OI, and there's EA, which is like an X. So and again, they have their own kind of composite symbols. So the trees that are involved, and I'm just going to call them up now.
Because that last set of what you're calling composites with the adding in the extra vowels, that's not just trees, that's like gold. Was one of them gold? And one was elbow?
Yes, yes. So I'm just looking let me see
because that's where it gets a bit weird for me, like trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, these four, the 20, they all sort of have a system, and then it says in some things I've read that those other vowels were added in a later date.
Yeah, because it looks like they're translating from Latin, and they're using those sounds to bring in ideas from other languages into the. Here we go. So the the right hand side horizontal notches. Beth is birch, Lewis is rowan, F for farn, which is the alder, Sal or Salia is S for willow, and Neon is ash. Then you have Muin is vine, Gort is ivy, Niedal or Gedal is reed, Z is straff, which is blackthorn, and R is ruis for elder. Then you have H for oath, which is hawthorn, D for dar, which is oak or dir, Tina, T for holly, C, call for hazel, and Q, which is also a C, because there's no real Q in Irish, it comes from another language, quirt, which is apple, the apple tree. Old is the apple fruit, but quirt is the apple. Also, this is Old Irish. So then you have acme, the fourth acme, which is alm, which is white fir, O, which is on, which is gorse. Then you have ur, which is heather, E, Ada, which is poplar, and I, which is Ida, which is yew. And then the Auvag, so Auva, which is the X symbol, which is EA, a combination of vowels. Then you have the kind of diamond, which is the lozenge, which is OI, which is or gold. You're right. So there's also a kind of almost half a Greek key kind of symbol, and that's for UI from Ilan, which means elbow, because with the Ilan pipes, you play with your elbow against the pump.
Wait, say that again. What are you doing with your elbow?
Oh yeah, bagpipes you blow through.
Oh, bagpipes.
Yeah, okay. But Ilan pipes, which is the Irish version, you have a pump under your armpit, and you play it with your elbow to inflate the pump.
Oh wow, I have never heard of this.
And then that little kind of thing looks like an elbow, an arm and an elbow. The IA is all those cross hat, it's kind of two X's together, and that's the Ifin, which is the pine. And the AE or the X is the Avenchol, and the P is the soft birch, and that's a line perpendicular to the central line that all the lines are carved on. And then you have the space symbol, which looks like the feathers of an arrow, and they call it the eta, which is the feather, or spa, space, or eta tuhil, the reverse feather, and that designates the end of a text in the fancy versions.
So with those like feathers,
yes,
they were used at the beginning and the end?
It looks like they were used yes, they were used at the start and the end to designate.
Like, sort of like a capital letter and a full stop at the beginning of a sentence and the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so
like...
some of the stones don't have that at all, because obviously some of these things were added in towards the end. So you can see the development like anything. If you see a very early text in a language, it's going to be kind of fairly basic, and then it gets all the ornamentation as the culture has more time and effort to invest in it. So you have all those kind of things. But
yeah, so basically what you were just saying then with the Acme is that letter stands for that glyph because that tree starts with that letter. So that tree is associated with that glyph in an alphabetical sense because its first letter begins with that consonant, and that's why it's
exactly. And as we were looking into it, the trees in those sets, the letters are arranged in the trees with trees attached to them, and then the trees themselves have corresponding similar attributes. So I think it warrants some more research on my part, but what I did find out when I looked at the yew and I looked at the gorse, they both and I excuse me while I between screens here, but here we go. So the yew and the gorse are both in Acme 4, and the yew and the gorse both have yellow flowers, and that's as far as I got. Now I know the heather doesn't generally have yellow flowers, but the arrangement of the leaves in the yew and the gorse follow a similar pattern, and the leaves on the heather, I think if we looked at them, would have something similar. And of course with fir trees, the leaves of the fir trees are kind of, they're not wide, they're the evergreen arrangement, which is very similar as well.
Like spindles,
little spindles off kind of offset in a kind of a corkscrew way, as opposed to straight out. So it would be interesting to see, because if you look, say with the roan, and I'm just trying to think now, the willow, and sorry, the roan and the ash are both mountain trees, but I don't know. I know they're both mountain trees, but they also grow along the river, as does the willow. So that might be the connecting thing for Acme 1. And as we know, ivy has to grow up other things. Reed reed kind of needs propagation as well. But the blackthorn and the elder, I'd have to find what the connection is there. But now the holly can grow near the oak, and the oak can be a forest on its own. A hazel and apple usually grow together, and the hawthorn usually is nearly the main tree where it is. Like in Ireland, we propagate hawthorn bushes and whitethorn bushes as the containing walls of a field in Ireland.
Okay.
So,
and hawthorn is like the traditional fairy tree, right?
It is. And it's considered a fairy tree when it grows on its own inside another enclosed area.
Like the one on the hill of Tara.
Yeah, exactly. That it's kind of randomly just there. And it was never, because usually we propagate hawthorns as a kind of, they would be where other people would have walls or fences between enclosed fields. So the hawthorn bush is propagated to divide between the field and the road and the field and another field. Basically, they're thorny and they keep the animals in.
Okay, I was going to ask about the function of this tree. It's like, why that one?
Yeah, but the hawthorn, or also the blackthorn, it grows. The wood it grows is very strong, and it used to be used as a walking stick / cudgel for people. So if you're around Ireland, they have things for sale like walking sticks, and they call them shillelaghs, and they usually have a brown handle, but they're black at the bottom. They're not as cultured looking as a cane, because they have the knots of the wood in the wood, but they were used as a walking cane. But they used to make very big, thick versions of it, so that you basically, if you met a bandit, you could clobber him over the head, and and
multifunctional.
I
love that word, shillelagh.
Shillelagh, yes, shillelagh.
I'm gonna shillelagh you in the face.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of because it's something that is sold to tourists. A lot of Irish people wouldn't actually use them in general anymore. But my grandfather had one as a walking stick, actually, and there are little anecdotal bits of travellers in the 18th and 19th century going around Ireland to the houses of the nobility, and the nobility that were still very much Irish nobility. They'd be more in contact with the Irish traditions than purely English traditions. They used to make some of them would make very strong furniture, so they could literally take the leg off the table and use it as a weapon if there was a fight in the house. It's like, oh my God. Like, that's Uncle Pat. Yeah, he that's his favorite leg of the table. Why is it his favorite leg of the table? Get him angry tonight and you'll see. But again, the hawthorn, the blackthorn, because it's what you get it's a relative of the sloe, and you use sloes to make gin. But they were very sour fruit, and they used to make them in concoctions for various medicine purposes, and it's considered, it's a very strong wood, so you could use it for things like fence posts and things like that. And like you would use ash wood for, say, making the old-fashioned windows, sliding windows that you have in older houses, because the ash doesn't break easily, so you could and it keeps it's water.
The sash belt comes down like that.
Excuse me? Sorry, say again?
Yeah, we dropped out with the set. Are you talking about the sash type windows?
The sash windows, yes. Yes.
Like this, yeah.
But
and then when they get stuck, you have to go, and then
exactly. And they should, the reason they get stuck is usually because when they were made, they mightn't have been properly kiln dried or whatever, and they're taking on too much moisture. It's the moisture is making them expand. So like a properly made window, unless again, if you've not taken it out completely to paint it, and you're just painting it in situ, and there's too much paint for the room. But yeah, they should be they should be perfectly salvageable and usable for years and years. But ash is also used for the game of hurling. It's what makes the hurling stick, the come on. And that game, it's known as
hurling, when you've got that curled
the
thing
stick,
and you
yeah. So that's the oldest ball and stick game in the world, and it's also the fastest ball and stick game in the world. So in the legends, the kings would play chess, and then if they were unsatisfied by how the games of chess turned out, then they would get their soldiers to play hurling. And if the hurling games didn't work out as planned, then you went to war. See, that's what civilization is about. You don't just land on the battlefield because someone called you a name. You work up to these things.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a process to this war.
Okay. Exactly. And they say hurling is the clash of the ash, because the ball moves so fast, the sliotar, that all you can hear is one hurling stick or come on hit against another while the ball is in the air, to try and catch the ball from the air.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
imagine it would be quite a violent game and lots of teeth loss.
It is. They do wear helmets now and teeth guards. But that's a relatively new invention since the 90s, I think. But yeah, it's still played. It's one of our national sports. So
I had no idea.
Yeah, so definitely look up the All Ireland hurling final, and you'll have it's usually a good game.
Okay.
The correlation, the people who play Gaelic football, and the counties in Ireland that play Gaelic football and the counties in Ireland that play hurling are differentiated. The hurling counties usually have better arable land, and the football counties usually don't have as good land. Sorry, no, it's the other way around. The hurling counties usually have good land, and the football counties usually don't have as good land. Don't know why, but that's the thing. So you have all of those little things, but they become formalized as national sports in the 1880s. But football is kind of newer. It's the Irish version of soccer, basically. But the hurling goes back thousands of years. It's been there the whole time. Yeah.
And so coming back to the four acme,
Yeah.
and you were like sort of starting to see these relationships between these types of trees or bushes are sharing the same acme because of their place that they grow, or the leaf shape, or the leaf flower, or the flower color. What do you think about this? I just sort of thought of it. It's like, well, there's four elements, right? Earth, air, fire, water. Perhaps, you know, you were saying that what trees grow by the water more often,
Yeah, like
along with the willow, and maybe
the
that's
willow and the hazel, and I sorry, and just bring it up again there.
so
So
maybe this is like a water element trees, and
yes,
then there might be more of a fire element trees, and then more of an earth, or trees are earth anyway, but you know,
yeah.
trees that
So
need specific
the
soil or something.
the willow, so the birch, rowan, alder, willow, and ash are acme 1, and the vine, the ivy, the reed, the blackthorn, and the elder are acme 2. Or acme 3, sorry. Acme 2 is hawthorn, oak, holly, hazel, and apple. And then the vowels are whitefir, gorse, heather, poplar, and yew. Yeah, that'd be something for the next week to actually map out their similarities and go from there, because
Because I don't know enough about trees to like be able to say, oh, well, that tree has that sort of fruit and the flowers at this time of the year, and like there's a lot.
there's a lot
We
there.
need
Yeah,
a botanist.
yeah, but it's just interesting because it's not just basically the letters. It's more than the letters being grouped in like shape or sound. They're building knowledge, and it's like a shorthand. That's the word. So that as we look into this, we can see there's more and more going into the shorthand. So you could boil it down into very little for the people who are learning certain things, that the shorthand was very expansive. As your knowledge grew up, you put it into certain categories from the same starting point. You just added the layers on. Yeah, that'd be the easiest way of saying it.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out for a little bit there, but yeah, so essentially, you know, the tree belonging to the letter, belonging to the glyph, is one level of understanding, and then when you come to learn more about that tree and its relationship with the other trees, that's a level of understanding, and then it's sort of whatever else this mysterious language has is just more deeper levels of its kind of expression as being this shorthand archetypal language.
Yes, exactly. And depending on what your training was, then the letter meant a different thing to you as your own knowledge expanded. So when you're looking into other layers, you're going to be able to probably see the correlation between the letters.
Yeah,
and
you're cutting out again. Yeah, all of that just slowed right down to a robot. Can you say it again?
I can re-say it, no problem. So that as you're looking into proteins and DNA, and you'll probably see correlations between the amino acids in those groups.
Yeah.
Oh,
actually, a new friend. I met someone who came over, friend of a friend, the other day, and he's basically, his business is he's building graveyards, but they're not traditional graveyards. They're actually tree forests, and when people come to get cremated, he'll put their ashes with the tree, so they'll grow into the tree.
Wow.
And he was saying that human ashes are actually far too alkaline, pH wise, and they will not allow the tree to grow properly unless I can't remember what the process was that he does, but he treats the ashes in some way that makes them less alkaline so that they can foster tree growth. And then I think, yeah, there was too high in some sort of amino acid maybe as well. And then I asked him, I was like, so do certain types of trees require different types of amino acids? And he said, yes. And then the conversation moved to something else. So I want to follow that up with asking him about what he knows about that, because that would then correspond to what angle I'm coming at this with, is that that glyph is that amino acid. And if that tree has a commonality with that amino acid and that glyph, then we know that that glyph means that amino acid. And then we've got something to play with in terms of like the DNA coding, which is
exactly. And it could be that he's put in a certain type of trees, and maybe he needs to look at different other trees to work with that, you know, because say we'll say in Ireland at the moment, a lot of the forestry is non-native species. And they do make the soil very acidic, and the pH is off for other things. So like whatever trees you put in the soil affect the soil, but also maybe he'll have to rethink the types of trees, or maybe the types of corresponding shrubs that are needed to break it down, as well as dealing with the pH base of the actual ashes and how he deals with that. You know, everything's connected. Like everything is connected.
Like cross planting, like you plant tomato with basil and they prosper, so that will have this amino acid relationship at that nitrogen cycle level.
Exactly. And you see sometimes as well, it's like, you know, in some cultures what they do is they bury the body until the bones are free, then they burn the bones down, and then they bury the bones. And that gives, from their point of view, then their relative has crossed over from being a flesh and bones relative to actually being with the ancestors now. And that takes so much time, and that allows the mourning process to take place. And they have done some research where they've looked at Stonehenge, and they now know there was a wood henge farther up the Avon River, and they reckon that the initial stages of, say, funerary practices took place in the wooden circles, and then they did a procession up the river to the stone circle to allow people to become ancestors at that point, and that was a separate part of the process.
Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I
Gosh,
can hear
that got a bit jumbled up on the robot voice as well.
no problem.
But
But
you were saying that there's a wood henge up the road from Stonehenge, and then
yeah,
what happened next?
it's down the river from Stonehenge. So they reckon the initial funerary practice took place in the Woodhenge, and then they took a barge up the river, and once everything came to Stonehenge, it was making the relative now an ancestor. And
Beautiful.
And so
they have something similar in Bali, where they bury, I think, yeah, they bury the relative for a certain period of time, and then as a village there's like a group cremation ceremony where they dig everyone up, everyone that was buried at a certain time, and then they do this huge big group cremation ceremony.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's like each village will have their own certain time that they do it.
oh, excellent. Okay. And then,
Yeah.
okay, then no, that makes a lot of sense, really.
Yeah, and actually I didn't know that they were doing it when I used to live in another house. And that night I was sitting outside, and then I just felt all this energy, and I could feel all these spirits going shh, and they were going north, so they were going that way, and they were all I could feel all these spirits leaving. And then I found out 2 days later that they were digging up all the bones and to do the cremation. I was like, that makes sense, because I could hear them leaving.
Wow. What you
Yeah.
got, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny what you tune into. But yeah. So what else do we want to talk about before I think we've been talking for about an hour-ish now.
Yes. Uh, I think I'd just like to finish off with I think this is making me, as I research into this, the power of language and the power of language as a connecting force keeps coming through to me on different levels. And so I would like to finish off this by saying thank you very much for the work you've done to date. You've served very much inspirational for me, both as a, oh wow, she's done so much, and I want to know what I can add to this ever expanding conversation, and also gave me the proverbial kick in the pants to get and do something about something that I've been thinking of for so long. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about it for so long too, about 6.5 years. It's just been like rattling around, and I'm like, well, it's no use to anyone, just in my head. So I just kind of threw together what I have, which is it's like the beginning of pulling this whole jigsaw puzzle apart and then putting it back together again, because we've got all these pieces, and everyone's got different pieces and different skills and talents, and you've got all the linguistic knowledge, and then I've got my Chinese medicine, and then as people start getting interested, hopefully we might see that there's other people with expertise in areas, and because it is just another expression of a pattern, but this pattern, I don't know, there's something that feels really important about it, like it's, and if it is, because I see standing stones as earth acupuncture needles, that has been plugged into the earth, probably on a ley line or a nodal point where ley lines cross, which is probably where the land boundaries of the people were, because they were tuned into the land probably more so they could feel the energetic boundaries. And so, and the way that the Om script is written from bottom to top, it's suggesting this telluric or earthly connection to the cosmic, because it's a stone that's pointing up to the sky. And so if this earth vibration that can send signals to the cosmos and communicate something. And I also see it like all these standing stones, not just on Ireland, but around the world, they're on this earth at certain points, and every single one of them's different. So it's kind of, I see it like a musical system, because it's involving tone or words or written tones, tree names, alphabet letters. It has the potential to be spoken, which is a vibration, which can then create, possibly this kind of global communication system. Who knows?
Exactly. And the thing is, as much as we, in the modern world, in more recent times, because the modern world begins 2 centuries ago, but all the problems that have arisen out of a social order that was, you can say in the Western world, the Age of Enlightenment was brilliant, but the people in the Age of Enlightenment were only dealing with the level of knowledge and understanding they had then. And sometimes, because society grasps onto ideas for a long time, maybe some of the ideas we could have thrown out some of them and come up with new ones. So now we're dealing with the aftermath of maybe 200 years of the same things being turned over. And some of those ideas, like the idea that right now is the most advanced we've ever been, I do not, in my heart of hearts, think that's true. Sorry, can you hear me? Hello?
That all got cut out. Hello? Hello?
Hello? No, I can hear. I can hear you perfectly. Just the idea that we're now the most advanced we've ever been is not true. So I think now, with the network that we have through the internet, there may have been other networks that we're just not currently aware of in the ancient world. And I think you and I collaborating, we might touch on that. We might touch on that.
Yeah, well, the irony is that, like, we're right now we're using the internet, this technology, and it keeps glitching out because it's so advanced.
Exactly. Exactly.
And like, I've done telepathy experiments with people off and on over the years, and the more you practice it, the easier it gets, the more clear it gets. And it's like, that's the ancient technology. We just need to start practicing all that sort of stuff, which is when you do gardening or you touch the earth and you dig the earth and you communicate your body into the earth, you do pick up all of this information. Just like, have you read Anastasia by the Russian book Vladimir? I can't remember. Did you read that? The Ringing Cedars.
Oh no, I must look it up because it sounds amazing.
Oh yeah, I'll share that with you. But basically, this lady in Russia living in the forest. It's all a true story. This man ends up entering into her world. She brings him into the forest world, and she describes her life among many other things. And she's like a super being, and she can sing in any accent. She can impersonate languages. She knows all about how to build spaceships from organic matter, which has to be like a mind link involving at least 20 people for it to be a success. And then she also she will lie on the grass and she'll put her hands into the earth, and she'll be able to pick up information from her people that she likes to connect with are gardeners, hobbyists, gardeners in Russia, and she'll telepathically seed to their mind information about how to maximize their planting. And that's her hobby.
Wow.
So she's able to really, she's like this quintessential nature girl that is of the highest intelligence, and she's got all this cool information about how to grow seeds by putting the seed in your mouth and rolling it around in your saliva for at least maybe 30 seconds, and then the seed knows you, and then you plant that seed and it will grow to help you to blend its DNA with yours.
Yeah, because I follow an American lady called Penny Kelly, and she was saying she advises people to walk up and down their garden and talk to their plants, and then the plants that way will get to know you. But Anastasia even starts that with the seed. That's amazing.
Yeah. Sorry, you cut out all roboty again.
No, I follow a lady in America called Penny Kelly, and I think
Yeah.
she didn't mention Anastasia's name, but I think she tried to visit her telepathically a few times without disturbing her. But Penny was advising people. She's a farmer herself, and she uses biodynamics and a few other things like that. And she was saying you should go
Okay.
up and down through your garden, and by being around your plants will produce nutrients that will benefit you. But Anastasia does it. Anastasia does the seed work. So the plants are attuned to you straight away. She cuts out all of that. That's amazing.
And also, I think she was suggesting you can use your wastewater from your shower, and then you can pour, because you've cleaned your body with it. It's all your DNA flaking off in your skin cells, and then you pour your wastewater on the plants to water them, and then they're getting an update of your daily rhythm. What's the human shedding off today? And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now. And I will send it on to you once it tells me it's updated and all that. So thank you so much.
Well, before you stop, shall we exit gracefully?
Oh yes, that would be right. This is me being rude. Thank you all very much for watching. And I hope to have many of these conversations with Anaya here, between Bali and Ireland. And thank you very much, Anaya, for inviting me to this conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. And I just like to say thank you to you, and also anyone that's out there that's interested in this. Well, we're starting to pull apart, building off the video that I've already put up on my channel. This will get added in there too. And we're just starting to pull this kind of mystery apart, and then it's obviously going to involve more people as more people get, I guess, this old new knowledge that we're all remembering, and we can all contribute into trying to understand, like, the ancient technology essentially is what these standing stones are. So yeah, if anyone wants to comment or communicate with us, you can do that through the YouTube comments. And yeah, I look forward to making the next one with you, Joni, and see what else we can start looking into. The language of the trees.
Okay. Take care, everybody, and catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.